The late autumn wind howled through the near-empty parking lot as the suited man adjusted his coat collar, shivering against the biting cold. His leather shoes tapped briskly on the concrete, his breath visible in the frigid air. He had come to the outskirts of the city to inspect the site for a new warehouse, nothing more than a formality. But what he found instead, parked crookedly by the old service road, changed the course of his entire life. It wasn't the dented, rust-stained sedan that caught his eye, it was the small figure standing beside it. A little girl, no older than 6, wearing a torn pink sweater, oversized boots, and trembling in the cold. Her hands were raw, lips pale. She stepped forward, clutching something close to her chest. Then, in a voice so small it could have been the wind, she said, "Sir, she's too weak to beg now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the hidden stories behind every tear, every silence, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. You never know how many hearts your share might reach." The CEO paused mid-step, frowning. "What did you say?" he asked, not with irritation, but with an instinctual sense that something was terribly wrong. The little girl pointed a thin, shaky finger at the car's open trunk. Her hands were so chapped they looked like they could bleed at any second. The man, Michael Langford, 41, billionaire, and head of Langford Innovations, was not known for impulsive decisions. But something in the girl's eyes stopped him cold. Without waiting, he walked over and looked inside. It wasn't luggage that lay inside. It was a woman. She looked no older than 30. Skin pale and stretched thin over hollow cheeks, hair tangled like straw, and her arms wrapped protectively around herself as if shielding from invisible blows. Her eyes were shut, barely breathing. Her chest rose so faintly that for a second, he thought she was already gone. A ratty blanket had been tucked around her, clearly by the child. The smell, damp cloth, unwashed bodies, the faint rot of old food, clawed at his senses. But worse than the smell was the silence. The girl's big, sorrowful eyes didn't move. She just stood there, hugging an old teddy bear, as if waiting for a verdict. Michael didn't speak. His throat closed up. The world, for a moment, slowed to a cruel standstill. He had built his empire on control, on plans, on data. But this wasn't something he could spreadsheet away. It was human pain, raw and real, folded up in a trunk like a discarded afterthought. The girl's name was Maddie. She was 6 years old, and her mother, Isabel, had once been a music teacher at a small charter school until a car accident destroyed their lives. Isabel lost her job when the pain in her spine kept her from standing for long hours. Then came the bills, the repossession of their tiny apartment, the days in shelters, the nights in the car, and finally, the silence. Isabel had stopped talking, stopped eating. Maddie didn't understand depression, only that her mom didn't smile anymore, didn't sing lullabies, didn't play the imaginary piano on her lap. All she knew was that she had to keep mommy warm, had to feed her when she could. She'd beg outside gas stations, offering to wipe windows with a dirty rag, hoping someone would drop $1. But today, her mom didn't even respond when she shook her. That's when she saw the man in the suit and thought, maybe, just maybe, he would care. Michael's world had always been black and white, profits, losses, projections. But standing in that lot, staring into the depths of tragedy, something cracked inside him. He scooped the woman into his arms, wrapped his coat around her frail frame, and told Maddie to get in his car. They sped off toward the hospital as he barked orders into his phone, mobilizing people who'd never heard him sound so desperate. Doctors rushed to save Isabel. She had severe malnutrition, anemia, a failing immune system. But she lived. Over the next few days, Michael learned everything. Isabel hadn't used drugs. She hadn't abandoned her child. She had simply fallen through the cracks. One accident, one bad break, and society turned its back. Her own family had disowned her years ago for marrying beneath her. But through it all, she clung to Maddie, her reason to breathe. Michael couldn't let it go. He visited every day. He brought Maddie coloring books, new shoes, a proper coat. He sat by Isabel's bedside, listening to her faint voice describe her former life, how she used to play Chopin and Bach, how she dreamed of teaching at a conservatory. He found himself smiling around her, laughing with Maddie. And for the first time in years, Michael Langford, the man with penthouses in 3 countries, felt like a human being again. The media caught wind of the story, but Michael didn't care. When a journalist asked why a CEO would care about a homeless woman and her child, he said only this: because they mattered before I found them. The world just didn't see it. Isabel slowly recovered. It took weeks, but color returned to her cheeks, strength to her voice. Michael offered her a job in his company, not out of pity, but because she was intelligent, organized, and fiercely protective of her daughter. She worked in community outreach, helping others who had been lost like she had. Together, they built a program called Restart, offering temporary housing, mental health support, and job placement for displaced families. Maddie, she blossomed. She went to school, made friends, laughed again. On her 8th birthday, she stood on stage at a fundraiser for Restart and, with a microphone too big for her little hands, said, "I don't remember everything from that time. But I remember being hungry. I remember being cold. And I remember a man who didn't walk away." That night, Michael wept. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a man who had seen the face of despair, and chosen to do something about it. His company profits soared, not because of pity or PR, but because people believed in what he stood for now. Hope, redemption, the power of one yes in a sea of no's. Sometimes, the smallest voice leads to the biggest change. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your engagement helps us reach more people with stories that remind us, there is light, even in the darkest moments. Speech balloon special request. Before you go, drop a comment below. What would you have done if Maddie had approached you that cold morning? Certainly. Let's continue and deepen the story further, expanding its emotional arc, cinematic depth, and the transformation of the characters, bringing it closer to a full-length 6,000-word experience. Here's the continuation. That winter passed in a blur of healing, rebuilding, and silent promises. Isabel stayed in the hospital for nearly a month, undergoing treatments, physical therapy, and counseling. At first, she wouldn't speak when the psychiatrist visited. She would just stare out the window, hands curled around the blanket like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. But every afternoon, like clockwork, Maddie would skip into the room with a drawing in hand. Stick figures, sunny skies, a little dog she hoped to have one day. And every evening, Michael would return, sometimes just to sit in the corner and read while they ate dinner together from hospital trays. Isabel started asking questions. Quiet ones at first: why are you helping us? Or, don't you have more important things to do? Michael's answer never changed, because someone should have helped sooner. One afternoon, he admitted something to her he hadn't told anyone in over 15 years. His own mother had died of an overdose when he was 12, and he'd spent a year in the foster system before his uncle took him in. He remembered hunger. He remembered silence. And he remembered the one teacher who looked at him like he mattered. That's why he couldn't walk away from Maddie in that parking lot. That girl, she had his mother's tired eyes, and his 12-year-old soul. The story wasn't about charity anymore. It was about connection. By spring, Isabel had regained her strength, and her eyes sparkled again when she spoke. She smiled more often, and one afternoon, Maddie burst into laughter when her mother playfully tickled her under the chin. It had been years since Isabel had felt that lightness in her heart. And she knew, with unwavering certainty, that they had survived not just because of Michael, but because Maddie had never given up on her. That little girl had begged when her own voice could no longer call for help. The job Michael offered wasn't a handout. It was an opportunity. Isabel spent her first few weeks shadowing staff at Langford Innovations. But what impressed everyone was her way with people. She didn't speak from strategy. She spoke from survival. When she looked into someone's eyes, she saw their silent wounds. When they spoke about eviction or depression or domestic trauma, she didn't blink. She listened. And they trusted her. Restart began in a single warehouse converted into short-term family housing with social services on site. Then, it grew. Volunteers came in droves. Donations surged. Within 6 months, there were 3 restart centers around the city. Isabel trained new staff. She gave TED-style talks. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a voice. And as for Michael, something inside him softened forever. He still ran board meetings and negotiated global deals, but now, he left early on Wednesdays to pick Maddie up from school. They had inside jokes, favorite lunch spots, and a shared love for reading silly bedtime stories. Isabel, still guarded in some ways, slowly let him in. She cooked dinner when he visited. They sat on the porch and watched Maddie play. There was a tenderness growing between them, unspoken, fragile, but real. One night, months later, Maddie fell asleep in the backseat of Michael's car after a day at the park. He carried her inside gently, careful not to wake her, and Isabel followed behind with a soft smile. They tucked her in, and as they stood by her bedside, Michael whispered, "She's going to change the world one day." Isabel's eyes welled up. She already changed mine. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Life still brought struggles. There were hard days and sleepless nights. But now they had each other. And every morning, when Maddie opened her eyes, she saw 2 people who would never let her beg alone again. Speech balloon. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Stories Collection, because every view helps us tell another story that might just change a life. Folded Hands special request. Please leave a comment below. Do you believe one act of kindness can truly rewrite someone's future? Share your thoughts. Your words might inspire someone to act.